Does what's happening with the banks now, the ones that are providing a lot of the facilitation, worry you so much?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I suppose it has to be a concern for any industry when they see banks that are closely related to their sector in this level of distress. And certainly the expectation will be that Silvergate will go into receivership very shortly. And as you've mentioned at the top of the segment, the suspected contagion then that could spread with it. For myself personally, as somebody who has weathered the GFC and other financial storms from within traditional finance, what we're seeing in crypto play out is probably on a smaller scale and over a longer time frame than what we saw in the 2008-2009 kind of era in traditional finance. It's certainly worrying, it's certainly concerning. But do I think it's going to have a long-term impact on the industry? No, I don't. Because I think what we're seeing instead coming up behind is traditional finance. We know that traditional finance itself is interested in coming into cryptocurrency. And I think that they're just waiting for the regulatory cover under which that they can then come in. So we're certainly seeing that coming through in major regulatory centres around the world, including here in Australia.
You mentioned regulation. Is, in your view, the SEC probably, I suppose, the biggest risk factor moving forward? Because it does appear they're getting relatively aggressive on the space, and it's almost impossible to know where they're going to direct their eye next.
Well, I think that's the issue when in the absence of qualified, regulation, that we're seeing regulation through enforcement, which is not an outcome I think that anybody favours, least of all the enforcement agencies, one would suspect. But certainly I think too that there perhaps has been this perception that regulators around the world have been taking a back seat while cryptocurrency has been allowed to kind of run riot. And I just don't think that that's a fair representation of the work that likely has been underway within these regulatory bodies. I think what is important though, and I know this sounds, given the experience we have with FTX, but it is important that the responsible players within the crypto industry, put forward their expectations around, appropriate and proportional regulation for this sector. It's weathered many storms and its death has been foretold many times, and yet we're still here. And certainly this is going to be the trend for the future. So I think it's timely now for regulators around the world to come to the table with the industry and put together, as I say, that proportionate and appropriate regulatory response.